Sing with me, Cupcake.
Everyone has a baby they want to protect.
After the commercial. If I told you things I did before. Oh, nice. A little old school here. Yeah.
That's how you had to sing any song in the 90s.
There are 7 deadly sins: gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, lust, and envy. 7. You can expect 5 more of these.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's the miscellaneous movies.
The movie you're about to see is in
as far as there is no story and no plot.
It all sounds like some bad movie.
And ready. When I'm doing a miscellaneous podcast, I love Nitro Energy Drink. To order, call 314-485-9294.
I'm really excited about this show more than you think, because this is like this is the best way to bring in the fall season, in my opinion. I think this is perfect.
Yeah, we still got some summer, but here we come fall.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the movie that we're going to talk about today?
The movie is 7, 1995. I've been pretty excited about 7. But for more reasons than I think the average person would realize, that the whole movie just captures the time perfectly. The first time I watched it, just the difference in opinions, the people that you're with, and how it ends, and I just think that the movie's pretty cool.
I would say normally let's go around and tell everybody's history about the movie, but I guess it's just between you and I.
And Cupcake.
And Cupcake. Yeah, of course. I'm sorry.
Cupcake's seen this movie?
Oh, yeah. The big thing was Brad Pitt and all this other stuff. Shawshank came out, so we had Morgan Freeman. So we were watching it, or at least I was watching it, for those actors. And because it was, like, popular and stuff like that, so. And then after, like, when you got into college and stuff like that, that's when it became, like, a cult classic, and then you had to watch it all the time, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth.
This is when Brad Pitt really started to turn into, like, a real actor instead of, like, a poster on like girls' walls when I was growing up. like Legends of the Fall came out, and that was pretty good. And then this shortly after, and it was like, oh man, Brad Pitt's really got some acting chops. Like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Legends of the Fall.
See, I like that movie though. I liked it. Going back at it, looking at it after I started like Brad Pitt as an actor, I like it a lot. That Interview with the Vampire, that's another great.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be doing that one. Yes,
fantastic.
Tom Cruise at his creepy best. Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, and then you touched upon Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if I saw Shawshank Redemption before or after I saw 7, but that's where I really fell in love with Morgan Freeman and his entire character in 7, the stoic
Would you
detective.
say that could have been his breakout role? Was Shawshank?
I mean, man, well, it just depends because they were within a year of each other. Depends on what you saw first, but yeah, I would definitely say one or the other. I mean, I can't think of what else he was in before.
Now, see,
7 or 4.
I think I remember watching Shawshank before 7.
So. In any case, if you watched either of those movies and you didn't come away being a Morgan Freeman fan, you're crazy.
Yeah,
because those two movies are fantastic, and the time that they came out was cool.
Yeah.
I think one of the first things that I noticed when I was watching 7, you'll notice that there's a bleached appearance. At least back in the 90s, you noticed it right away. I think with digital film the way that it is now, and digital filters that they put on everything, it's easy. But on this one, there was definitely a weird appearance of it. And you notice it right off the bat when you start watching it, that it looked almost bleached. And so as I started looking up things about this movie, and I think maybe even when I got the DVD, I remember them talking about it, but they intentionally did that to make it more kind of creepy and, I don't know, dirty looking.
Yeah, they did a great job with it. I think they did that with a lot of movies back then. Not like saying it was a fad, but I mean, if you look like Payback, you look at, other ones kind of similar to that, especially like British gangsters, they have that kind of like filter to it to make it more grittier.
Right. What I noticed from watching 7 is there's a lot of similarities between the Alfred Hitchcock films that I was watching, specifically Psycho. And there's got to be a reason why or for me, I noticed it and I was like, there's too much similarity for that not to be on purpose. And I think that David Fincher obviously had to be a fan of Hitchcockian film for him for the similarities to be there. One, when I talk about the bleaching of the film, that's obviously that's an ode to so many different things. Hitchcock did the same thing in Psycho. Like, Psycho could have been filmed in color, but he chose to film it in black and white to make it look more dark and dreary throughout that movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and it's amazing because this is like a lot of stuff I don't even know. So I totally get what you're saying. I'm sorry, I'm not really.
I just pausing for you to interject if you had anything.
Because I'm like, ooh, ah.
When 7 came out, I don't know if you remember the way that I do, but nobody wanted to talk about the pivotal reveal at the end of the film, and the end of the film is the box scene. I'll pause here for you to insert that clip.
Who's in the box? Oh, what's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
But everybody that I knew didn't want to tell you, what was going to happen in that scene. And similarly in Psycho, in the very first part of that movie, the main character, Janet Leigh's character, Marion Crane, she dies off. And that was a big part of Psycho when that got released.
You kind of established that was like a main character at first.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big twist in Psycho. It almost makes you feel weird because your main character, the person you're getting to know in the first 20 minutes of the film, dies off in the first 20 minutes and you switch characters. And you realize it really more becomes a movie about Norman Bates than it did about Marion Crane.
Yeah. Game of Thrones did the same thing too in the first season when they killed, killed the Sean Bean.
Winter is coming.
Yeah, exactly. The whole time you're thinking, when's zombie John, darn it, Sean Bean, when's he coming back? When's Ice Walker Sean Bean coming back?
Yeah, because he has to be there for the double cross. That's his thing.
Totally disappointed Ice Walker Sean, or what is it, Sean Bean?
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, sorry. Yeah, totally disappointed Ice Walker Sean Bean doesn't come back to life. Headless Ice Walker Sean Bean.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure he's decapitated.
And reason with a headless man.
So when we're talking about the film stock, like when one of the reasons why they wanted to make it look very dark and brooding with removing the chemical that they used in the finishing touches for 7 is that opening scene in Gluttony when they're walking around the apartment and they're cutting through the darkness with their flashlights. And I just think that whole scene is just amazing to watch. Similarly, the reasons why he chose black and white is for the shower scene in Psycho. And there's that to me was pretty significant. Like the choice and why they did that and the way that it ended up making it look. And that in that time period, I thought that was pretty fascinating. And it really locks you in visually into that movie.
He was a great innovator back in the day, Hitchcock. He took things that you were telling me about, that camera thing. I mean, no one thinks about those things except for like people who have really a good vision on certain things. At least I think.
Well, that's one of the things that, like I said, when I started watching these movies and getting into Hitchcock, I had visited Universal Studios when I was a kid. And at Universal, they had a whole Hitchcock experience. I hope they still have it. It's in Florida. And you really get to see how he made certain shots through all of his classic films. Really get you into everything that he was doing back then. And it shows you how much he innovated. And everything that we watch today, they're using his style of filming and zooms and pans and the way that the camera moves. Another cool thing is all the stuff he couldn't do but wanted to do when they re-released Psycho, like Gus Van Sant's Psycho. There's like an opening scene where that was impossible for them to shoot in the 60s, where the camera's obviously on a helicopter and it's moving towards a window, and it goes through the window into the room where Marion and her boyfriend, I can't remember the name of the actor, anybody would kill me but anyways, they're sitting on a bed and they're discussing something. Well, and when they redid it with Gus Van Sant, they were actually able to achieve that shot, and it's fascinating to watch if you're looking for it. If you ever rewatch the Gus Van Sant version of Psycho, to see those kind of things finally happening is kind of an ode to Hitchcock in that too. So, anyways, it's kind of cool.
Is your time so empty?
No. Well, I run the office and tend the cabins and grounds and do a little parents from my mother, the one she allows I might be capable of doing.
Some of the things I wanted to talk about were the similarities between those two movies is like I said, nobody wanted to tell you what happened with the boxing. Nobody wanted to tell you to lead up what was going to happen with that. And that's the same thing that happened in Psycho. In fact, when Psycho was released, the whole way that movies were released were changed because of Hitchcock. Hitchcock demanded that all the managers that ran the theaters that played would not let anybody in at a certain time. Otherwise, it would ruin the experience of having Janet Leigh pass away in the first 20 minutes.
He feels a little chill. Can I bring him this blanket?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Going into that film like that, from the advertisements where it says it's required that you be there at the time that the movie begins, the managers are told not to let anybody, enter the theater. And then he put out advertisements around the time of the release of that, because it wasn't the same way with movie trailers and that now. Like, he had his Alfred Hitchcock Presents crew that he made commercials for. I think he even filmed the movie with them, if I remember right. And he made these little advertisements that said that, don't tell your friends after you've experienced Psycho. You want it to be experienced for the next person. So when that movie got released, people were running out of the theater screaming in terror. That's how revolutionary Psycho was. It's hard to understand that now because everything we see day to day is spawned from that moment, from that release of that, including Seven.
Wow. I know I might be jumping ahead, but I did like how when we were talking about this earlier, the connections you did with each one, ergo, what's in the box, to the stabby. Do you want to start going into that? Because I'm really excited to hear that again.
When Hitchcock drew, everybody talks about the shower scene, just like everybody talks about the box scene and Seven. And what some of the similarities, or one of the main similarities, one of the things I think is most interesting is you never see Gwyneth Paltrow's head removed. You never see a shot of it in the box. But if you talk to people who watched this movie and who were affected by it from back then, a lot of people, and it says this online too on various websites, and I think even on IMDb, where people will say, "Oh yeah, I remember." So you see your head in the box and it's covered in blood, and they're like, that never happens. You never see that. That's all the theater of the mind. And that's what Hitchcock was famous for.
The amount of playing by the actor to make it stronger. In other words, if you have a symphony, always the last movement is the strongest.
The shower scene was filmed over the course of like a week with really specific detail as to not show any nudity and not show anybody ever get stabbed. The knife never punctures skin. There's never blood coming off of it. Nothing like that ever happens. But in your mind, after you watch that scene, you project it. You like that it did happen. Like you saw someone be stabbed to death, but it never really happens. In fact, the original release of that film was rated a certain way by the motion picture, however they rate it back then and today. And then he had to go in and show shot by shot in slow motion that what they saw to give it a more violent rating never actually happened, but it was actually in their heads that they thought they had seen it. And then that's how they got the more, I don't know, I guess family-oriented rating. That's not family-oriented, but whatever. I don't remember if the rating system went R to PG-13 or if I can't remember how it went back in the 60s, but I know that it was improved upon once he went back and showed that those things had never actually happened.
It was a success in the Blockbuster, right? Well, this is before Blockbuster, I think, but
a huge success. Yeah, like you can watch old newsreels of people standing outside the line like it was Star Wars.
Nice.
And I think Bernard Herrmann, the guy who did I think he might have gotten an Academy Award for it. Wow. Yeah, I'd have to look at it. I'm a self-proclaimed expert on the film, but I can't keep everything in my head. Yeah, it was pretty well received by everybody, as far as I remember. Cool. Before we started, I went and grabbed my special edition movie on this. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it looks like one of John Doe's books, and I was really, really stoked to get this one. It didn't come out in the 90s. I want to say it came out in the 2000s. But if you ever watch that movie and you see all the books and all the weird shit that he writes in it, you kind of get a little preview of some of the stuff that they created to put that in.
Cupcake wants a picture of it.
I recommend it. Some of that's from the actual books. Yeah, it's cool. Pretty cool. But there's like alternate endings with storyboards. I think the storyboards were a little rough if I remember, but you get the idea.
Mm-hmm. That looks kind of like the We're Alive. So,
you're talking about the comic books?
It's a whole other thing. I want to stay on the topic. Yeah. So we were also talking about some of the fun facts of Psycho 2, which I didn't know.
They used chocolate syrup for blood because the black and white, you never know it, but it showed up more in the black and white film. So in the scene where Marion's hanging over the edge of the tub and she's dying, and the blood that you see going down the drain, which is a classic Hitchcock shot, he had to force that shot to happen, but the way that they poured this chocolate syrup into this tub to go down it was all forced. Like, it doesn't naturally go down a drain like that. They had to make water jets to make it go a certain way.
That's crazy, because
coincidentally,
it looked real.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks, it definitely looks like a black and white film with blood in it. The other thing that I had talked to you about, you can look up, I'm pretty confident, in any major release in Hollywood back then, it's the first movie that you ever see a toilet in. That's another way that film broke ground, was the first toilet in Hollywood.
Breaking barrier.
On the silver screen.
They add cherry syrup to make it red now. Cupcake.
I think it's Rod Sterling played Marion. Am I messed up? Is that... Film fans, if they do listen to this, are going to be like, you couldn't remember Ron Sterling's name, you idiot.
Getting back on the 7, Brad Pitt could not find a suit to fit him.
Takes time, settle in.
No, he intentionally, in Rod Sterling, that's his name, for this movie, I remember hearing in the DVD audio, they talk about how he wanted to look like he didn't know how to dress himself. Like they let him go out and buy the worst ties. They didn't actually have a wardrobe guy go out. They let Brad Pitt go and pick it out so it would look really cheesy. They did that intentionally. But I thought his look was pretty cool. And that's after that movie came out, or maybe he was inspired by some other people. That's when everybody started having that bedhead haircut.
Oh no, the haircut. Yeah, that was. I mean, even when I used to have hair. Oh yeah, it's good times. But. Yeah. I loved his apartment setup. I think that was really cool, especially after dinner when they're discussing stuff, and that was pretty cool the way they were all kind of situated.
With the train that keeps going by every 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The soothing, relaxing, vibrating home. I'm sorry.
That's the getting to know you with Gwyneth Paltrow in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of opens the relationship between Gwyneth Paltrow and Morgan Freeman. They later have a scene together separately where she tells him that she's having a baby and she's trying to decide whether she's going to keep it, because the world they live in that town, wherever it was, I don't think they actually ever say. I think it's just supposed to be like, shit town USA. She doesn't want to bring a baby into that world. So he goes in there. They have this really intimate scene together. If you haven't watched this movie, or if you have to rewatch that scene, because I think it's one of the best acting scenes ever. It really makes you feel for both of those characters. And there's a connection between the two of them that is like really crazy to watch. So I really recommend everybody take a look at that if you want to watch really excellent acting.
The gluttony scene. I didn't get the part where when they moved the refrigerator back and they found pieces of linoleum scraped up, and I guess he ate them. Yeah,
so they don't know to do that until they do the autopsy on the body. They find the pieces of plastic inside his stomach. So he goes back trying to figure out where the plastic belongs and looks at the bottom of the refrigerator and sees that from scooting the refrigerator
because the plastic didn't kill him, did it?
Ripped off. No, the plastic was just a clue as to the message. The message behind the refrigerator told Somerset or Morgan Freeman's character that this wasn't just going to be one murder where somebody was mad at this obese guy. This was going to be a series of murders for a reason. And then he goes back to his boss, who's played by Arlie Ermey, the great Arlie Ermey, who just recently passed away. Yeah. And he goes back and he goes, I can't do this. It's just going to go on and on and on. And in fact, it does. If everybody knows the end of the movie, even when we get the conclusion, he's not Like, and I think there was supposed to be a sequel to this movie too. That I don't know if it ever made its way out.
Never made, but they wanted it, and including the title for the sequel was supposed to be pretty cool. The way they got to it, yeah.
Was it 8? Was it 8? It was 8.
Jeez.
But my nod for that guy actor in this movie that nobody can ever, you never know his name. You've seen him in different movies. The hyperventilating guy in the which murder was it? Which murder?
Was the lust one.
The lust murder. When he has sex wearing the contraption to kill the lady, and they're interviewing him, and he goes, he made me fuck her. He made me, he goes into those spasms. That guy's name is Leland Orser. So I noticed him in that movie because, like, man, that guy puts on a show in this. Like, he is really distraught looking. It looks genuine.
Yeah.
And so from that movie, like, going into loving movies as a teenager, watching everything else, he's in all these other movies, and you start to notice, like, in every one of his movies, he goes through that same thing. In Saving Private Ryan, Alien Resurrection, Very Bad Things, and Bone Collector. And they reference it on IMDb too, like that he exhausted himself to make himself hyperventilate, and he would go through this whole breathing exercise before he, like, oversaturated himself with oxygen, and then, all crazy. Leland Orser, look for that, because he still does it in movies, I'm sure. It's just kind of his thing.
Have you ever seen anything like this? No.
One of the things that the big fans of the movie Seven would know is that in the scene where they first run into John Doe, there's a chase scene, and Brad Pitt climbs across the top of a car because he's trying to figure out where John goes once they get into this traffic, and he falls. And in that scene, he injures himself, and then throughout the rest of the movie, he has to have that injury. The actor, Brad Pitt, literally injures himself. So anything that was shot out of sequence, they had to go back and put that cast that he's wearing throughout the movie, they had to put that back on him and reshoot for the rest of the movie.
Wow. I did not
know
that.
Real injury that he's just... They talk about that also in the audio commentary on the disc. That's how I knew that. But that's also referenced in IMDb. One of my other fun IMDb references was when we were talking about the gluttony scene. Mm-hmm. In the movie, especially in the DVD, you can actually see all the little cockroaches crawling around the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gross. And you would think, like, today it would probably all be CG. Well, in this movie, they had a cockroach wrangler.
Practical effects. Oh, yeah.
They had to come out and pour them all over that poor guy. And evidently, according to what I read on IMDb, pushed cotton balls in his nose and ears to keep the cockroaches from crawling in. Oh. But that did not stop them from crawling into his underwear.
They're all in his junk.
So that's how it's done around here. I beg your pardon, detective, but this guy's been sitting in a pile of his own piss and shit. If he wasn't dead, he would have stood up by now.
They had to make a barrier all around the set where they didn't want these things to go. Vaseline to keep them from crawling off the set. So you could just imagine this guy that I'm calling the cockroach wrangler. I don't know what Hollywood call him, but he's walking around with Vaseline and cockroaches like, hey guys, I'll just be a minute, just smearing Vaseline all over everything, all over the set to keep his cockroaches from crawling away. It's pretty fucking,
sounds like a bad porn. The reveal of John Doe was a big deal too, because none of us knew who he was, right?
Yeah, for sure. In Psycho, Janet Leigh was billed for that movie. When you go into it, you think this is who you're going to be riding along with throughout this movie. You think this is going to be a movie about this character. In Psycho, it's the opposite. You don't know who is going to be the killer. So when you get to the end and you find out it's Kevin Spacey, at that time, Kevin Spacey was hitting his hot spot. This is the same year Usual Suspects came out. Mm-hmm. Like, so to not bill him evidently was a big deal. And I knew that from the audio commentary, listening to it, and from experiencing it when I was a kid. Like, oh my gosh, that's Kevin Spacey. So what I read on IMDb was they double billed him in credits because he couldn't do any of the post the interviews or anything for the movie ahead of time. Otherwise, it would have spoiled the film for anybody that hadn't seen it. Like, what's Kevin Spacey doing interviews for? He's not in this movie. Like, that was a big reveal when they did that. I particularly like that scene too, where we had talked about. There's a scene in it, and they reference it on the DVD audio commentary, where Brad Pitt, when they're doing the box scene, where Brad Pitt takes his pistol and he's just filled with fury, and he takes his pistol and he shoves it into Kevin Spacey's temple, and he just pushes it right off, like hits him in the head with that pistol. And if you watch the movie, Kevin Spacey does this thing where he's like, for real? And he turns his head and he looks like right at the camera, and I'm sure where the director is standing behind. Pretty sure he got hurt from that. Like, I don't think it sustained permanent damage or anything like that. But yeah, he jams that gun into his head. You watching the movie, you're like, oh God, that would hurt. Yeah. And then he makes that face and he looks at the camera like, son of a...
That's the real deal. Happy. Like, he's just like, who is this motherfucker?
Yeah, exactly. That's the look that he's got on his face. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I remember that scene. Yeah.
And if you haven't noticed that scene, it's pretty funny if you know Kevin Spacey later. Which, another thing we were talking about is it okay to like Kevin Spacey again? We don't know. We don't know, but this is the world that we grew up in. Kevin Spacey was amazing in the 90s. I apologize. I don't know, but he is a really good actor, and so we'll see.
The box scene, no matter any time you watch the movie, no matter any reference, it always goes straight to the box. And I believe, since we've been talking about all this, that has a lot of psychological cling to all of us. Not to mention, maybe we probably saw a head in there, because now I'm thinking I saw a head in there. But God, that's such a great scene. And even Kevin Spacey's speech he gives right before the end happens. You don't care. Like, you only care about the box. Great acting from everybody in that movie to make it to where you want to keep watching it, because it's not just that. Even the sloth. I think the sloth scene where he was so emaciated, and then he just, and then, that was messy.
Oh, you're talking about the skinny guy. That's pretty gross. And you can go through on the DVD. I think every single one of those pictures that they had hanging around the apartment, I think those are on the DVD. You can go through like the whole series.
Wow. So when did it become a cult classic? Like, was it good in the theaters for 7? We know Psycho was amazing. Like you said, it was pretty much compared to Star Wars. But what was 7? Was it good in the theater? I only saw it when it was on VCR, DVD back in the day.
So I think that 7 was excellent in the theater, but I don't think it was well received by everyone who watched it. But for teenage me, I loved that movie when it came out. So my 15-year-old to 16-year-old persona or whatever, that's I loved it.
A little early.
I think people more enjoyed it when it came out. Well, yeah, it was. Yeah. But I think more and more after a little bit, people enjoyed it, especially once it hit DVD. I think it got a little more recognition. I'd have to look up and see what awards it won. I'm sure it won something.
Cupcake. Good. Do you think this was a guy's movie or an everyone's movie? Not really a girl's movie, obviously, but everyone. Yeah. First
time I watched this movie, I watched it with my dad. And I can remember once we get to that box scene, you watch that movie, and it's such a freaking ride. And you finally get to that scene, and my thinking was, because you don't want that serial killer at the time. For me, you don't want him to finish the work that he's been doing. So you're stuck in that argument with yourself. With like, man, if he kills him, he wins. So you can't let him do it. Mm-hmm. But then if he doesn't, he has to he makes that decision that he doesn't, then he has to force himself to live with himself the rest of his life, knowing that this guy just killed his wife and his future child.
They did a great job.
So I can remember my dad having the complete opposite side of me. He's like, kill that MF, kill him, put a bullet in his brain. And now older as a father, I totally have that thing. Like, I don't care if we finish his work. I don't care. There's no way I'm letting this guy walk away from that wherever they were in the desert under those power lines. There's no way I would let him walk away from it. But at the time, as growing up, you're just like, well, you got to take the intellectual. You can't get away with this. But that's why I like this movie. Just like so many people like Psycho, and why I still like Psycho today. It's one of those movies that leaves you thinking after you've watched it. The movie's not over when you're walking out of the theater. The movie's over as you're talking about it with your, thinking about it with yourself, talking about it with your wife when you're leaving the theater, talking about it with your friends who haven't seen the movie yet. It's a movie that continues on even afterwards.
The horror only comes to you after you've seen it, when you get home in the dark.
It's okay.
Cupcake says she loves Hitchcock. God, I can't talk. Fuck. She says she loves Hitchcock. Fuck.
Hitchcock. She loves Hitchcock.
Cupcake says she loves Hitchcock. Fuck it. You say it.
Hitchcock. She loves Hitchcock.